everyone, I hope you're having a great week. I am here to talk to you guys today about our new musical period and artists for this week. Now, last week we talked about the Baroque period in classical music history. Well, this week we are talking about classical in classical music. So that's a whole time frame, right? The time frame from 1750 to 1825. Yeah. And that time there were so many different musicians and composers, people who wrote music, that this specific time in history, there were so many kind of squished together in that time that we can't cover all of them in one conversation. So today I'm going to highlight two specific composers, musicians, gentlemen who wrote music in the time, and they're going to be our artist highlights. So the first one we're going to talk about is Mozart. Who's heard of Mozart before? Most of us. Now, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, that's his full name, he was born in Salzburg, Austria, which is kind of near Switzerland and France and Germany. It's over in Europe. Now, he was born into a family of musicians. His dad was a really good violinist and a composer. Now, Mozart was considered a child prodigy. That's a big word. Does anybody know what a prodigy is? A prodigy is a person from like a really early time without any training at all who's really good at something. So you typically think of it like with music. Sometimes you'll have an artist prodigy or someone who just, sits down at a piano and starts to kind of pick it out and play. And that's how Mozart was. As a child, he understood music really, really well. Even though he had been exposed to it some, he hadn't had much formal training. And so at age 5, he actually wrote his first piece. And I looked it up because I figured you would ask. His first piece that we know that's recorded, he published it, I think he was 7, but the first piece we know that he wrote was the Minuet and Trio in G major. I'll throw a link in there so you can hear just a clip of it. You don't have to listen to the whole thing, but I just want you to hear this person, this kid, was this amazing composer. And even if it was simplistic, a little bit more simple in form and in nature for the song, he could write music in like kindergarten. He was awesome. And that was kind of his thing. He was this young person who was really good at writing music. Now, Mozart went on and wrote music throughout his life. He got pretty popular, pretty famous. One thing that we think of him today is he composed the most common melody, the tune for Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. Now, a lot of people will say that he wrote it. Actually, it wasn't, like, he didn't write the tune itself, but he composed it in a way that made it a song rather than just like a nursery rhyme kind of a thing. It didn't have words yet, but that's pretty cool. So when you hear Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, think of Mozart. And then the next piece you're going to listen to is going to be what we call the Turkish March, which is a song with a really clear melody. A lot of us will recognize it. That's something really specific to classical music to this time. We went from having counterpoint, remember that idea where there were multiple melodies and like lots of different parts playing on top of each other that sounded good, but they didn't necessarily go together. It was hard to hum along. You couldn't really hum along to like the song from last week. This week, both songs that you're hearing, you're going to have a distinct melody, a distinct main part where you've got harmonies that build, but they're all kind of the same tune, right? It's going to be something that you can go back and it could get stuck in your head. That's the melody. So Mozart worked as a musician most of his life and a composer. And as he got older, he was still a really, really fabulous musician and composer, but people didn't seem as impressed with him anymore because he wasn't a kid. They didn't make a big deal out of him. And at that time, being a composer, a performer, a musician was kind of considered like a servant job. It wasn't a big deal. And he just couldn't really cope very well with that. So Mozart passed away when he was 35 years old, but he wrote a lot of music before then. And so you're going to listen to the Turkish March by by him, and I hope that you enjoy that. And so yeah, Mozart, he's this middle one right here. And another important thing, the symphony or the big orchestras like we think of today, they got popular during this time. You can kind of see the yellow is the strings, that orange or red color is the woodwinds, and then you have the brass, so things like the horns and the trumpets, and then back here in the back is the timpani or the percussion. Now, we'll move on from there, and we're going to talk about our next person. Our next person that we're going to discuss is Ludwig van Beethoven. Has everybody heard of Beethoven? I hope so. Yeah, Beethoven. His music is some of the most maybe iconic, the easiest to pick out and say, oh, that's Beethoven. You know that it's him because of a very distinct sound. When someone says, hey, what is classical music? A lot of times people, the very first thing that they think of is Beethoven and his music. Now Beethoven, he was born in Germany, and his father was a singer and his first teacher. And even when Beethoven was young and a child, he became a traveling performer. He was really good at playing instruments, and he was able to support his family in doing that. As he got older and started composing, he started to lose his hearing. So by the time he was an adult, he became deaf, where he couldn't hear anymore, like at all. And we still don't really know exactly what the cause of that was. He may have had a medical condition. He may have been sick as a child. We're not really sure. But regardless, he still loved music, and he composed a lot of music during the time he was deaf. In fact, some of his most famous work was after he had moved to Vienna, and his job and his goal was writing music, and he was a conductor. He loved to direct. Remember, the conductor is the guy in front of the orchestra. He was a very passionate conductor, and he loved to do that even when he couldn't hear anymore. The orchestra would follow him, and he would direct these beautiful pieces that he had written even when he couldn't hear, which is really, really cool. He was considered a genius, and he lived until he was 56 years old. But his symphonies are probably the thing that we remember the most. Most of us think of his Fifth Symphony. When we watch Line Riders, a lot of times the Christmas one that we watch, that's Beethoven. Da 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 da, da 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 da. And think of those melodies, the things that you hum and can sing and pick out. He's really known for that. Another big thing that happened in the classical period is we took voices, so like choirs, and we took the orchestra, and we put them together in these beautiful symphonies where you had both. One of his most famous works, it's a really long symphony, Symphony number 9, but a part of it we call Ode to Joy. He wrote that, it was his very last symphony, and he was pretty old at the time, and he was deaf. He was completely deaf. And he directed this beautiful piece, and this is a true story, and he directed, and it was amazing. The audience was moved, and they were on their feet clapping at the end, and he couldn't hear them. Someone actually had to tap him on the shoulder and turn him around so that he could see everyone who was impressed with his music. And I just think that that's really interesting. So you guys are going to hear an excerpt, so like just a little bit from that 9th symphony that he wrote, the part with Ode to Joy, and listen where the orchestra instruments meld and mesh together with the voices and the choir. And that was something that was really new during the classical period. So there you have it. The very last thing that you guys have the option to watch today is going to be the House of Sound, discussing the string instrument family. We have done these a little bit in the past where we talk about each instrument family. We'll do one for the next couple of weeks. So again, you're going to listen to Mozart with the Turkish March, and then you're going to listen to Ode to Joy by Beethoven. And then you're going to have the option to do the string instrument family with House of Sound. Have a great day, guys.